Great. So everyone is trickling in. Amazing. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Power Skills. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. My name is Emily. I'm from the Career Advising and Transition Services Office at the McGill School of Continuing Studies. It's such a pleasure to be here with my colleague, Nayo Gahiapi, who is a rockstar career advisor. He is committed to supporting local and international professionals find work. He's a bilingual resume writer, an engaging workshop facilitator, and overall passionate professional. I feel lucky to call my colleague. Just want to say, you want to say hello, Nayo?
Well, thank you. You might see me blush, and I admire you a lot, Emily. I learned a lot from you, so pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, this is already the third edition of Power Skills. This year's theme is Lives Transformed, Our Post-Pandemic Era. And I'd like to recognize that we at PACS acknowledge that our work in Montreal takes place on the unceded Indigenous lands of the Mohawk Nation. This land is known as a gathering place for many First Nations. And at Power Skills, we're committed to using this summit as a place of gathering, connection, reconnection as well, and a place to empower all voices and perspectives by providing a safe space and free and accessible learning opportunities. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Tania Chomyk, who is a HR consultant, learning and development specialist, coach, facilitator, tons of amazing credentials, who really is dedicated to helping people realize their full potential for long-term happiness and success. She has a 25-year career-rich experience in higher education, and she is dedicated to helping strengthen the value that people bring to an organization through design and delivery of programs and initiatives that enhance employee engagement, performance, and the overall mission of the organization. We're so grateful for you, for your presentation today, Tania, and thank you so much for leading this session on the value of self-awareness and how to really take the leap from self-blindness to self-insight, and how to turn those rewards of making better decisions, building stronger relationships, and an overall better life for yourself. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I hope I'm going to be able to deliver on that nice introduction and agenda for today. So first of all, thank you, Nayo and Emily, and to the entire CATS team for hosting this wonderful Power Skills Summit. And as a former employee and two-time alumnus, I'm truly honored to be here to speak to you today and to take you on a little self-awareness journey with me. Ask me if I want a drink, and rarely will you get a yes. I had many moments of self-awareness in my life, but the pivotal moment, that point in time where I was able to see my life from outside in, happened in 2008. A huge aha moment came to me in my graduate program after completing an assignment on looking at behavioral patterns of a family 3-generation genogram that I needed to produce. It wasn't the interviews and it wasn't the information that I gathered that really stood out to me, but that genogram and the components of the behaviors that I saw was what struck me. And that was that moment when I was able to see, oh my God, I need to do something. It was that point that I believe that it became so pivotal, and realizing that I was living a life that I wasn't really aware of. And that's when I was able to see it for what it was and decide that I was compelled to make a change. My desire to preserve my marriage and my family finally took a backstage to the peace and the tranquility I so yearned for me and my children. History does repeat itself. I knew I couldn't change the behavior or the person, but I made a conscious decision to change the course of my life, and I did. No blame towards my loving father, nor any animosity towards my children's father. Just the realization that this is true. Their struggles were real. What I was living was real. Alcoholism is real. My vision became clear. I could see it, I could feel it, I could smell it. A happier and a healthier place to call home. No more outbursts, no more apologies, no more eggshells to walk over. Yes, I could breathe again as I inhaled peace and tranquility into my lungs and into our lives from that point on. The journey of self-awareness is a lifelong one. It's a continual process of looking inward, questioning, and discovering the things that have been there all along. Living on autopilot is no longer an option. It's time to confront truths about ourselves to lay a stronger foundation for living a more intentional life and a more conscious use of ourselves. If we want to move to a more conscious way of living, we must first understand ourselves, who we are, what we value, what triggers us, and ultimately, how do we want to live? Self-awareness then is that essential meta skill of all emotional intelligence skills because it starts with the self. And that self-awareness allows us to think about our decisions rather than make them without thought. The question is, how can we become more self-aware wherever we are today so that we can make better choices and decisions in all aspects of our lives? What do we need to know? First of all, we need to understand what self-awareness really is. Why is it important? And how can we boost our self-awareness so that we can make these better decisions and choices in our lives? So I'd like to ask the audience to answer this question on a scale of 1 to 10. How self-aware are you?
Uh, 75% people answered.
How many people answered? Okay.
80%
Wow.
of people answered.
Okay.
So I think we're getting a good number. Let me know when you want me to share the results.
Yes, please. I think you can share the results.
Okay, cool. Share results.
Okay, that's great. So it's interesting. We have the bulk are at 8. We've got a group of people that are quite self-aware. That's great. We've got a couple of 9s up there. And so we've got the 7s and 8s, and then we have the 6, the 5s, and the 4s. Okay, so that's great. But it's interesting to see how, it's nice actually to see how a lot of people believe that they're self-aware. Okay, thank you for that. Let's continue. You can remove the poll. Perfect, thank you. Okay. So we've got an audience that the majority, I'd say, really feels that they're self-aware. Let's look at the definition of self-awareness and see what that's about. If we say that it's how an individual consciously knows and understands their own character, feelings, motives, and desires, there's something deeper from that self-awareness as well, is what Tasha Eurich describes as the ability to see ourselves clearly, yes, to understand who we are, how others see us, and how we fit into the world around us. Well, very interesting is that apparently, according to a research study that was conducted with 5,000 participants, most people believe they're self-aware But the reality is only 10 to 15% of the people studied actually fit the criteria. So self-aware or unaware. And this is kind of my why to deliver this type of workshop, is because a lot of us believe that we're self-aware, but we're not exactly self-aware, and there's work to be done. And this is why you're here today, because this is going to be the beginning of your journey to really becoming more self-aware. So let's understand why 15% and what is that criteria? Oops, excuse me. So the first thing we need to understand is it isn't one truth. It's not exactly what we perceive other people see us as to what we're actually showing, right? So this is like a perfect image of what the reality is and what the cat really thinks he is. So in essence, what we're saying is that self-awareness, there's two sides. There's the internal self-awareness. How well do we see ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, and values, while external self-awareness is understanding how others view us with those same factors. And this is where the challenge becomes, is trying to find the balance of who you are, what you are actually showing, what's coming out versus what other people see in you. So that's one. Now, if we take a look at the Jahari window, this is something where you can actually see your personality, what traits that you have, and how you're actually showing that to the people. So we all have this window, and we all have things in each quadrant, okay? The purpose of the Jahari window is a technique that helps people understand their relationships with themselves, so how true you are to yourself, and with others as well. So this is also very helpful in team settings. And what we could see here is that the open area, basically what the psychologists who came up with this Jahari window, which is Joseph Luck and Harrington Ingham, this came out in 1955. And they say that the best place to be is in the open area. We want to be as much in the open area where we know what we know and others know the same thing about us, okay? It's not always easy to get there, but the reality is we're gonna have something in each of those quadrants. And those quadrants are where we're gonna have to examine and say, what do we want people really to know about me? How much do I want to divulge? This is where you have to weigh the information. It's very situational. What you would probably, share with a friend. So let's say known to self. So the traits that you know and that others know, things that you share with your friends, the things that you're honest with your friends about, things that, they can see exactly who you are, right? So, for instance, you share with your friends that I know personally myself, I don't like to drive at night on the highway. I don't know what's happened with me, if it's an age thing, but I've reached a point where driving at night on the highway is no longer an option. So if I'm going to go out with my friends, it's going to be either before, it's going to be after, someone else is going to drive because I don't feel comfortable. So that's in the open area, and I'm very okay to share that, right? Then you have stuff that's in the blind spot. So it's unknown to you, but it's known to others. So certain things, you may not know that I was pretty nervous to come up here and do this presentation because it's the first of its kind. So, oh no, that's not the right example, sorry. Unknown to you, but unknown to others. So it's what you see that I don't necessarily see. So perhaps I have a bit of a twitch or something and I don't necessarily see it, but you can see that twitch in me. So that's something that you can see that I can't see. Another thing is that I'm aware of, but subconsciously or consciously, I hide. And these are the things that I don't want people to know about me, right? And so we all have that. And those that are unknown to you and unknown to others. That's something that you probably haven't explored yet. That really happens when you're in a certain situation, a first-time circumstance, and all of a sudden you're responding, you're reacting to something that you've never had to react to before. It's also a time where if you're pivoting, if you're going into a new career and you're looking at new skills, then you realize, oh my goodness, I didn't know how good I was at this, or I didn't know how much I liked this. So this is the window that we all have. We all operate in this. And the most important thing is to try to get into the open area as much as possible. So that's the importance of sharing this and to show you that there's work to be done. But again, this is personal. You're all going to be at different stages of your awareness, and you're all going to make decisions based on what's right for you. The next criteria that's very important to look at self-awareness is the pillars. So Tasha Eurich, this is a book that I read, Insight. This was extremely helpful for me. And this really it's like a Bible to self-awareness. I highly recommend this book. And this book offers many, many tools in the back in order for you to actually do some of this work to find out if, what you need to explore, whether it's your values or your passions and so forth. So there's a lot of wonderful information. And this insight really became an insight for me as well. So definitely something worth to look at. So the values, you've all probably have done a certain amount of that. You pretty much know the things that you value, the things that you're passionate about, aspirations. And if you don't, this is the time to actually take some time to do and look at these things, because it's all about alignment. In order to be authentic, in order to be true to yourself, in order to be self-aware, you need to know those things. And you need to see that if they're not aligned with the things that are happening in your life or the things that you believe in, then there's something that you need to do about that. And that's when action becomes important on something that you've discovered about yourself. And so for me, when I look at the fit in the environment, I realized what was happening in my environment only later in my life, only when I started seeing a shift in the patterns or the behaviors of the children. And I knew that I had to do something. And so it was also to preserve that environment of health and safety and feeling where you can thrive. Because an environment to me is really, you're a product of your environment, and also your performance is conducive to your environment. So this could be in the workplace. If you don't feel like you're in a safe environment, it's going to have an impact on your work. So hence why it's important to really listen to the gut, what's going on when it comes to do with those first four, the values, the passion, the aspirations, and the fit in the environment. And that's that internal part. The patterns and the reactions and the impact, that's more in relation to the external. And when we look at patterns, it's the way we think, right? It's the way we feel, it's the way we behave. How we behave has a reaction to other people. So the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviors that reveal our strengths and our weaknesses, right? So there's a pattern and you're thinking of something a certain way. When you react in front of people, you're showing them a strength or a weakness of yours. And so this is where sometimes you have to think, twice. So I don't like anything plastic. I don't like plastic utensils. I don't like plastic plates. I don't like plastic cups. The minute I see someone taking out and wanting to serve me plastic, I'm ready to say, you use plastic? So instead of saying you use plastic, I either pick it up and use it, or I'll just see if I can use something that's a real plate. So that's an example that shows you something about me, my reaction to something that other people then will say, oh, wow, I didn't think she was that picky, or, oh, wow, right? So it has an effect, the reaction. And then, of course, the impact is important because it affects the people around us. So the impact of my decision back in 2008 had a major impact on my children, on our family unit, and in fact, the rest of my family, and also with my friends and colleagues, because they probably saw a different me. I wasn't living anymore in a certain hidden quadrant because a lot more was revealed. So impact is really important. So how do we gain insight where we move from the victim to the growth? Because that's the whole point, right? We're gaining insight. We don't want to stay in a point where we feel we can't make decisions or we can't make choices, because we all have a choice. Doing nothing is a choice. So we want to move towards the growth. And how do we do that? Well, one of the things is, of course, self-reflection and introspection. These are the two things that really give us insight. The problem is, how are we doing the introspection? Are we doing it the right way, the way we should be doing it? And probably not, and that will explain why the 15% when it comes to the criteria. So if we're examining our thoughts, feelings, and motives and behaviors, how are we doing that? What are the questions that we're asking? So I'd like you now to get into groups of two. We're going to do a little exercise where I'd like you to think of a situation that you're currently facing at home, at work, with your partner, child, colleague, supervisor, friend, any situation that you're currently facing. I want you to discuss the process you're going to take in addressing it, how you're going to proceed. And then we're going to come back to the larger group. So we're going to give you about 4 minutes to do the exercise, about 2 minutes each to talk, total of 5 to come back. And then we're going to look at that, share that a little bit, and move on. So thank you, Nayo, for taking care of the poll, not the poll, but the breakout room. And we'll come back in about 5 minutes.
Breakout rooms are ready. And just click accept. Are you staying with us here, Tania? No. Okay. Me and Emily will stay here.
Yeah, okay.
If anyone wants to stay here, hey, hi, Luvana. It's been a long time.
Hi, Nayo. Yes, nice to see you here.
Yes, exactly. Great. And anyone else here wants to join the conversation? I see there's still 19 people who didn't join. We're even going to pause the recording until they touch the tip of the iceberg. And sorry here. Yeah, just there's not enough time.
So how about to the ones who did have enough time to get through something, if they would want to share a little bit about that experience?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if you didn't feel you had enough time. Yeah.
Don't want to put anyone on the spot. I see Deborah, you unmuted yourself? Or was it? Oh, no problem. The mic's in my group. No one felt comfortable enough sharing a specific experience. So I know it takes a little bit of time to warm up.
Okay, that's interesting.
I shared with a management prof regarding teaching in a virtual world setting and missing instant feedback from the students. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm. Missing the instant. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. All right. So I think we'll continue. And I think, of course, you know, if you didn't have enough time, and perhaps it's interesting how some people felt that the situation they probably didn't want to discuss with someone. So it goes to show that, when you're working with someone that you don't know, how much are you willing to share? Okay, so that's a good point. And also, sometimes you can think of a situation that for those who can talk easily to other people, they can take a situation and easily share that without naming names. So again, it depends on the same situation for sure that you want to discuss and who your audience is. But more than that as well, the reason why a lot of us get stuck on a situation is that we're not necessarily introspecting the right way. And what that means is that we're not asking the questions that we should be asking. So if I stayed back in my situation and I stayed as the victim and saying, why is this happening to me? Why is this person behaving this way? That got me nowhere. But my first reaction was, what can I do to change this situation? What can I do to change my environment? What can I do to make this better? And just uttering the word what, starting the sentence with what, already puts you in a completely different zone, a completely different mindset of positive, of future, of empowerment. And this is what I wanted to share, is that when we introspect, don't stay in the why question. That doesn't answer anything. It doesn't get us ahead. And the whole point of doing something like this is when you want to talk to someone about a situation or a problem, you want to get past it. You want to move past it. You want to overcome it. And that's the only way that you can do it, is by asking those right questions. And this is why this was a this played a big role in why the percentage was so low for 15. So if we look at the evil twin of introspection, we think, oh, okay, so we need to introspect correctly. We need to ask the right questions. Well, what about rumination? Okay, who doesn't ruminate? Who of us doesn't ruminate? I don't think anyone's going to say that they don't, right? That's when we keep all the thoughts in our mind and keep repeating them. And most often it's negative, and most often it's about our fears and our shortcomings. And that doesn't get us anywhere, but we all do it. So it's okay. We all do it. But what can we do about it? How can we get past the rumination so that we don't stay in that spot? We don't stay in a place where we're not able to see ourselves clearly, because now we're in the noise. We're all in the noise. We got to remove the noise so that we're able to see clearly and then to make some decisions. So some tricks to help stop ruminating is, what are those triggers? Well, for instance, watching the news now. Now the Olympic news is great. But if watching the news, 11 o'clock news, is very depressing because it's showing a lot of things are happening in the world, and you know that that's going to put you in a state of unhappiness, feeling bad, feeling sorry. So why do that to yourself? Limit the time that you're going to spend watching the news. Put stops, avoid the things that trigger the rumination. And that's where you can start. Spending time in nature and exercise. Again, you're going to find things that work for you, but the most important thing is to do something about it. We often say, oh yeah, I need to do this. Oh, I need to go there. But we don't do it. So it's acting on those behaviors that eventually get you out of that state. Hit the pause. You know you're in it. You're ruminating about something, a problem that you're having with a coworker. You're ruminating. Put a pause on it and say, you know what? I need to get up. I need to leave. You're working on a presentation. It's not going the way you want it to go. And you're just writing and this, and I've got to delete it. So you know what? Leave it. So kind of stop yourself. Look at when that's happening and say, again, consciously saying, what's going on here? I need to take a step back. And sometimes if we're not doing well on a certain task, on a certain project, we need to look at something that we do well, and that brings our level of self-esteem up. So it raises it so we can let go of what we're ruminating about in something that we're not doing so well. So we kind of balance that a bit. And share your situation with a friend or someone who's impartial. So the exercise, it's interesting that we just did. For some people, the sharing could have been very valuable because they didn't know the person and they were able to share and they got some insight. For others, they didn't feel comfortable. So again, it really depends on you. And if you didn't feel comfortable sharing with a stranger, then you'll probably feel more comfortable if you're sharing it with a friend or a colleague, someone you trust. So these are the things to do to help us with rumination. Now, our insights really come to us and we learn from a lot of events. They open our eyes to important self-truths about ourselves. When we think about new roles and new rules, okay, that stretches us out of our comfort zone. If all of a sudden we're in a new position or the rules have changed, we have to take a step back and we have to question, oh, how am I in this situation? How do I address this situation? So those events open your eyes to truths about yourself. Is this really what I want to be doing? Is this the job I want to be doing? So these important events will give you that insight into yourself. The volcanic events, now those are those eruptions. Those are those earthquake events, right? So they're acute. They shake you to the core. A death, loss of a marriage, of a family member, of a job. Those are really acute moments. And those moments sometimes really give you that insight and that clarity. And how do you learn? How do you move forward from those things? What do you need to do to get you to move forward? So again, the what. And everyday insights. Sometimes we see our behaviors in a totally different light. Sometimes we'll say something and your colleague will say, oh, did you notice she was like this? And it's like, oh, I didn't realize that this is how I was behaving. But when you're being called on it, that's when you realize. So these are everyday insights that happen to us. So the important thing is to learn from these events and keep our eyes open to those truths, because those are the things that are going to guide us. It goes back to the pillars of self-awareness, right? If what we value and the things that we're passionate about and our environment, of all those things, if we're holding truth to those things, then all the things that distract that, anything that comes to challenge that, that's where we are going to have to make some choices and some decisions. Because if we want to stay true to ourselves, this is what we need to follow. Stephen Covey once said, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, everything that you do is wasting time. So if you value certain things in life and you know what that is, well, then you keep that ladder on that wall and you make sure that all the steps that you take are leading towards the things that you want to achieve in life. So how do we boost our internal self-awareness? We know now what self-awareness is and what we need to do to really understand that. We know how important that is because it helps us guide us in these choices and decisions that we make. How can we boost our self-awareness? Well, mindfulness, of course, it all starts with the mind, right? And there's meditation in there, there's reframing, compare and contrast. We're going to talk a little bit about reframing because that's a technique that I have built a muscle for using that technique. And I feel that that's a technique that really serves many, many people in many situations. The compare and contrast is if you're in the current position and 2 weeks ago, you loved it. You loved everything that you were doing. And today, you're not happy. There's something that's not making you feel productive, okay? That compare and contrast is making you sit down and say, what is it about this week? What is it about today that I am not feeling what I was feeling 2 weeks ago? So you're peeling that onion to find out what is it, so that you can make an informed decision and you can make choices to say, okay, this makes sense. I understand why I did this. And I can take it away from the fact that I still like my job. It was just the situation. It was just this task. So the compare and contrast is important to do. Daily check-ins as well. You do those check-ins with yourself. How are you feeling today? How, motivated? Why aren't you feeling motivated? What is it that's bothering you? A lot of people also keep journals and they write about this. And it's very good because you're taking stuff again from your mind and you're transferring it over onto paper. And sometimes when you do that, you gain a lot more clarity and you're removing the noise that's going on in your mind. Meditation, of course, is something that I think it's a very personal thing. I love to meditate and I do it on a daily basis, but everyone will pick something that works for them. And it could be those little walks, it could be 5-minute breathing, it could be power poses. There's all kinds of things, but find what makes it work for you. I bring reframing up because reframing is not about the people, it's about you. When you reframe a situation, it gets you from the problem to the solution much quicker. So here's an example. I think we've all been in an elevator ride and too slow, right? So automatically we want to find a solution. So how can we make it faster? What do we need to do? Who do we need to call security? What do we need? Let's fix the problem. Right away, we want to go into the fixing mode. When we reframe the problem as the elevator is slow, the wait is a little annoying. So what am I going to do about the wait that's going to help me get through that elevator ride? Now, the answer is here, make the wait feel shorter. I would say, put on your plugs, listen to your music, someone's in the elevator, have a chat. Because what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a situation where you don't feel negative about it anymore. You just say, this is what it is. And how can I make it better? Language then becomes really important here because it's the words that we choose in our minds that's going to help us get through it or get us stuck. So when you see people as, if you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with, students and so forth, when you reframe the language, it's a totally different experience. I had an experience once in student services, and I don't know how many times I repeated myself to the student and they just didn't get it. And I felt that I was starting to get a little bit anxious here. I'm thinking, what's going on here? How come he doesn't get it, right? So what did I do? I said, no, I need to bring down my anxiety so that the student does not feel what I'm feeling. So I turned around in my mind and I saw the student as either someone who had some challenges and just couldn't understand, or someone who didn't understand the language, or I saw them as a 10-year-old. And I know that if I saw them as a 10-year-old, I probably would have a lot more patience and I would have kept giving the answer. So when I say reframing is about you, it really is, because the whole thing is you want to control your emotions so that you don't get all upset and you don't show that. And so what you need to do is work it out in your mind. So the language is very important. You see a problem, I see it as a challenge. Someone's criticizing, guess what? I think it's good advice. Afraid? No, I'm just curious. I'm exhausted. Oh, I need to recharge. Just the language is going to change your whole mood. We just said at the beginning that we're going to take questions at the end. So I hope you're all, okay with that. But if there was something that you really wanted to share, by all means, but we really want to take the questions at the end. So, okay, let's look at what's hindering our self-awareness. We're going to do all these good things to help our self-awareness. We're going to introspect a little bit better. We're going to try to control the rumination. But what about the false sense of confidence? How does that affect our self-awareness? Well, it does. Because what happens is, if we're so confident about something that we did in a previous position, and we know everything about that project, and we come now to another culture, to a different organization, and feel, oh, it's going to be the exact same thing because we did it like this. I know how it's done. You're coming with this false confidence, but guess what? It doesn't always work. It doesn't work in the climate that you're in. You need to be aware of that. You need to say that that experience is something that it's an experience, but what you learned from it is that that experience is for there. You learned certain qualities, you learned certain skills that you can perhaps transfer over into this project, but it's not the whole piece. And so this is where you need to be self-aware that what worked then doesn't necessarily work now. And sometimes our experience on a certain project can actually be detrimental if we use the same practices and the same policies on something that's completely different, but in our mind, we think it's the same. So we need to be very careful about that. And people that are in a position of power, this also gives you, it hinders on your self-awareness, because chances are people are not going to be as upfront with you to tell you things about your behavior and how it's affecting people. And so you have a certain perception of yourself, and guess what? It's not how other people are feeling. And unless you go to those people and find out, you're not going to know. And chances are the people higher than you probably are not going to say anything either. And you have less people to ask. So which brings me to the next slide, is that the importance of narrowing the gap. How do we close the gap so that we can become more externally self-aware? Well, we know about 360-degree reviews. I'm sure we've heard about them. They exist in organizations. And if they don't, we know what that means. It's really getting a flavor of all the people around the circle to give you some feedback. And that's valuable because it gives you insight from different perspectives. And it gives you a little bit more of a global kind of, okay, this is how I'm coming off. You need to ask people who have your best interest at heart. Now, I know this is not easy, and sometimes people don't feel psychologically safe that they can ask, and that could be a bit of an issue. But you need to find people that have your best interest at heart, and that could be friends. I often do check in with friends. How do you think I'm coming off? How do you think about this? And just that alone is so helpful. So it's constantly getting that feedback. And even if it's a small group of people, it's still enough to give you some insight. But of course, the 360-degree in the work context is probably one of the best ways to get a good perspective. So I like what Adam Grant says if you want to get feedback, and perhaps you're working on a project, and he says you go to your team members and you ask them on a scale of 1 to 10 on an idea that you have, a draft or performance, what do you give me? Chances are the people rarely are going to give you a 10. They're certainly not going to give you a 1 to 5, maybe 1 to 6, but you'll probably get a 7, 8, or 9 in there. The next question is then, how can I get to the 10? What do I need to do to get to the 10? And that's when you get real feedback, because now they have to give you an answer. They didn't give you 10, they gave you 8 for a reason. What's missing? That's how we close the gap. So to kind of sum up, self-awareness really is that balancing act between the internal and the external. And we're not going to always get it right, folks. I don't have it right, and I'm in my 50s, okay? Because like I said, it's a path, it's a journey. But it's very important to understand those two components and how much you need to really get the information to balance how you're projecting yourself and how true you are to yourself. So if I ask you the question again, how self-aware are you after this presentation? What would you answer me? Would it be the same? Would it shift your number? So we don't have to necessarily do the poll, but it's more for you to really see now, how do you fit into the self-awareness whole criteria? So if you want to know more about yourself, and I'm very happy that I think Emily has put it into the chat, insight. There's a 7-day insight challenge, which you could easily take, and then you're part of a group, and wonderful tools in this book that really help you. So whether you're looking at your values, your passions, there's excellent exercises, and of course, a very more in-depth insight into self-awareness. Today, I just shared some components of it, which I thought would be valuable, but something for sure to explore. And a lot of people say that once they read this book, it really becomes that Bible to self-awareness journey. So something for sure to consider. And once you do one of the tests, this is what Tasha Eurich says, that there's 4 self-awareness perspectives. And we want to be in the aware quadrant, right? That's when you're highly external self-awareness and you have high internal self-awareness. This is where we strive to be. And so you can see that there's introspectors, there's seekers, and there's pleasers. And you'll be able to find yourself, identify yourself once you do one of these tests to see where you fare. So this is actually a very nice, I really like this piece because it kind of gives you, right there, it's like you kind of know, okay, you're one of those 4. And where you fare, if you're a pleaser, oh, so that means you've got low internal self-awareness and high external self-awareness. So you actually see where the work needs to be done. So before I end off, I want to say that self-awareness really transforms us into supernovas, more beautiful, better, and brighter than we ever were before. This power skills is going on during the Olympics. And I could not be more proud of this Olympian who took a pause and said to herself, I can't do this right now. This is not serving me. This goes against what I'm feeling right now, and didn't listen to all the rumination that was going on. And that must have been a really hard feat to do. All the pressure, but she did what was right for her. She made the decision and the choice that was right for her. And so her self-awareness is over the charts. And you know what? Her taking a step back and moving herself from the Olympics for a couple of days, she came back when she was ready and she got a bronze medal on the beam. So she listened to herself. She listened to that gut. And this is why she's like that perfect example for self-awareness. And when we think of this as a power skill, it really, really is. The more self-aware you are, the more you really listen to yourself and to the things that are important to you in life, the better and the happier life that you are going to live. And this is in any context, in work, at home, with family, in any situation. Being true to yourself and really knowing who you are and how others see you, getting that balance is what's going to help you in your journey. So continue your journey of self-awareness and reap in the aha moments along the way. And let me tell you, there's going to be the no moments as well. And those are the ones that are also very, very telling when you have these crisis moments that happen to you and you have to make decisions. So I'm really happy to be here, to have delivered this workshop. It is the first one that I gave on self-awareness, and I'm so proud and happy that it was part of the CATS Power Skills Conference Summit. So if you want to learn more, you want to dig a little bit deeper, you can always reach out to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would be happy to help you along your journey. If it's understanding your values, your passions, deciding what you want your future to be like, then for sure we can work together. So thank you. And now I'm going to leave it open. If there's any questions, I'll leave it to my colleagues, Nayo and Emily.
Thank you, Tania. That was such an amazing workshop. I feel I could have listened to you for hours. And yeah, self-reflection is, I mean, what a journey. There's so much. I've been just taking notes. And I mean, I have lots of questions. We have questions in the chat. If Tania, if you have the time to answer one or maybe a few.
Sure. I have 3 questions from the chat here and a lot more from the registration, but I think we're going to focus on these of people who are here with us today. Do you want to go
I also
ahead?
have a hand up and a question that somebody wants to raise as well. Yeah, okay, so I'll ask the first one, the one that I had mentioned earlier on. Can we really know our motives 100%? Is it possible that our motives lie in the unconscious?
Oh, yes, I believe there is a subconscious thing that goes on. When we think about the things that we ultimately want in life, there's a subconscious and there's a conscious that goes with that. So for instance, if you know that you want to, I don't know, go to Australia and live there for a year, let's say, that's a goal that you have in mind. What starts happening is that subconsciously, your mind is going to start opening up opportunities and things for you to know in order to get you to that goal. So what may start happening is that, well, you may start talking to people about Australia. You may start doing some research during your lunch hour to find out how much is that going to cost you. All these little things that are starting to happen, you're not consciously aware that you're doing it until you've had that goal and your subconscious is allowing you to experience it. Next thing you know, you find yourself in a conversation, or you're walking and you find yourself in a group of people and you hear Australian accents. What's the chance of that happening? So yes, I do believe that the subconscious mind is working. It's powerful, and it has a lot to do with ultimately what you want to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you have great comments in the chat. People are saying very insightful. Thank you so much. Okay, we have another question from, actually we do now. Did you mention you wanted the person who had raised their hand to ask their question?
Yeah, for sure, like anyone who wants to speak up, just go away. And anyone who did write a question, if you want to ask it yourself, definitely go ahead. So Cecile, if I said the name right.
Right. Thank you, Nayo.
Hey, pleasure.
Thank you, Nayo, and thank you, Tania, for such a great session. I wanted to ask, one of the things that you suggested was that you can speak to a friend to get an impartial perspective. So I wanted to know, how do you avoid oversharing, such that after you've shared maybe something that you're going through, you don't feel empty, or it drains your energy and you feel like you give a lot away? So what are some of the things that you need probably to prepare yourself to have that conversation with someone and avoid oversharing, so that afterwards you feel like you benefited out of the conversation rather than it taking away from you? That's my question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a great question. So I'll tell you what I personally do. I do, Cecile, is that your name? I do a lot of self-talk.
It's Wusisile.
Okay, Cecilia. Okay, sorry about that. So I honestly do a lot of self-talk. I know sometimes if I want to share, or if I'm upset about a situation, I actually have the conversation verbally to myself, so I can actually hear myself speak, and I've let it all out. And that means I've let out all the noise that was going on in my head. So when I finally do have a conversation with that person or anybody else, I'm already in a state where I don't have to overshare. I've said everything I've had to say out loud to myself, and then I'm selective in what I tell them. So that's a great question, and I do that a lot. I hate to admit it. People must be seeing me when I'm driving and I'm talking, but now it's okay because we could be on Bluetooth, right? So they don't know I'm talking to myself. But yes, self-talk really, really helps me, and I suggest to try it. I think it really could be very helpful.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have I know Phil had a few questions. If we can just take the next two, max 2 minutes, as we're preparing for another session coming up. We really want to make sure that that we address Phil's question, because I know he had a couple.
Yes, thank you very much, for this session. It's a great session. Thank you, Tania. I'm going to make it real fast. I do have a few questions, but one is you mentioned, I understand that asking yourself what questions can be more productive than why questions, but isn't it still important to ask ourselves why questions? And aren't there benefits to asking ourselves why questions part of the process? And then two more quick questions were, what do you suggest? I think there are some tools, and I took some notes, but to embark on that self-awareness journey, what are some tools and questions that we can use, or do you suggest using to embark on that journey?
Okay, so thank you, Phil, for the questions. So yes, I'm a big, very fond of the what question. I really try to avoid the why. And I'm not saying that it doesn't come, but don't stay there.
Right.
Don't stay there. So if you had a why question, okay, why did this happen to me? Move away from that. Okay, now what can I do about it? I don't want you to get stuck in the why. That's the problem. So if we stay stuck in the why, we're not getting out of anything. So there's nothing wrong with asking the why question, because it's going to come up. Don't stay there. Move on and get to the what. So why did this happen? Okay, I can't answer it. Fate of God, don't know why, but guess what? It happened. I got to do something about it. And I move to the what.
Okay.
And to help you, Phil, honestly, this book right at the beginning has the tools. Take the time and do the exercises. They're wonderful. I wish if I had more time, if this was a workshop, I would do some of them with you guys, because they really, really helped me. And it really makes it clear as to the type of person that you are. So I really can't stress this enough. And maybe if I do have a workshop, I will, I'll let you know about it, or I'll let the group know about it and take you on that journey, because I am working on a workshop on the internal self-awareness and the external self-awareness. And let's spend time to really, peel that out. So yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for great questions, Phil, and everyone else. Thank you so much. And Luvana took the words out of my mouth. We would love to have a workshop with you. This is such an important topic, and you've been a real gem, as Guy has also mentioned in the comments. So great comments here. Thank you so much, Tania. Thank you. This was amazing. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'll be happy to share when I do have a workshop. I'd be happy to share it with you guys. And if ever that's something that you would be interested in sharing with the community, then that would be great. It would be my pleasure.
Thank you. We would be so happy for that. Thank you so much. Thank you for such a phenomenal session on, the importance of self-reflection, what are the right tools, and essentially what do you need to really live a more intentional life. And you really, you broke it down in such a great way that I loved learning about it. Thank you. Well, I look forward to the workshop, really. Participants, thank you so much for joining us once again. You have amazing questions and comments that you've left in the chat there. It's great to see how engaged you are. Please join us. We do have a workshop, a panel discussion now on women who lead. So Nayo had dropped it in the chat, the registration. Feel free to join us starting in 15 minutes. And feel free to check out our whole lineup of other sessions. Network, take advantage of this space at Power Skills to really power up with Power Skills and have fun and enjoy, and network with professionals from all over and learn about those key skills that are going to help you really explore and navigate your next best self, personally and professionally. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tania, once again.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I'll see you in other sessions. Okay, bye-bye.